on the upfront. Yeah, and every transaction's so different, you know.
Well, even in those, like the 10-page residential, single family 1 to 4, whatever,
Tract
multi-unit tract contracts, I still would see agents who were not properly trained on it, or they didn't know the nuances, because there's nuances to contract law that, you know, I can't even speak to it as a licensed agent because I'm not a lawyer. But you got to understand the implications. And there would be agents that didn't, or they didn't know how to read it, and they didn't give their clients the advice, and their clients would skip over some really meaty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's still high stakes in 1 to 4 family, but it's not near as high if you're buying a $4 million multi-unit. Ugh, I can't even imagine trying to write that contract. I would definitely not do it.
No, but to both of y'all's points is we only know what we know.
Mm-hmm.
You align yourself, you partner yourself with the right team you mentioned earlier, which is always key. We're talking about systems, processes, alignments, and that's kind of like where we're all talking about right here, right? We all get that, understand that, and that's one of the first conversations that we have with prospects is that. So do you have your team together? So, well, what's your team consist of? Well, let's make sure that first and foremost you have the proper representation on the agent side. Let's make sure that your lender understands what kind of asset you're looking for, because it's a different lender from residential to commercial, or even if it is multifamily or a quadplex. So there are those nuances that you want to know. Make sure the inspector is the correct one for this. Make sure that we have the right legal team that we can turn to when we have those specific questions. Your property management team. So it's all a team effort.
And back to actually managing it, I know there are some nuances with property management law that some tenants can use to kind of skirt that line. How nuanced is that information? If you don't know it, you can get really screwed.
It can. And Keaton can probably speak to this better than I can because of our situations. We've had a few where they'll use the letter of the law to be able to buy themselves another 30 days, 60 days. We've learned throughout the years that contracts are everything.
Mm-hmm.
Documenting text messages, emails, conversations goes a long way. So if you're doing everything by the book, yes, you do have to spend time going to court and appearing in front of a judge, but 9 out of 10 times, it works out. But the individuals that are doing it themselves, everything's fine until, you mentioned earlier, there's a lawsuit. And that's where things kind of get squirrely because, well, as a do-it-yourselfer, you didn't know that, hey, there's a property code 92, that you have to have smoke detectors, you have to have certain locks, keyless locks in the front, back door kind of thing. And those things, the new tenants, or there's legal representations out there that hone in on that and will advise these tenants to say, hey, we can grab onto this and we can buy you some extended time or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets costly time and money-wise. And, of course, individuals like Keaton, he would advise landlords, because there's some landlords that maybe will do it themselves, but they know enough to say, I need to hire an attorney like Keaton so I don't find myself in that situation. So there's that angle as well.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it really well at the beginning. You learned these lessons by having to go through them. You learned them the hard way. It cost money. It cost time. And that's the huge value add you guys offer as property managers is you maybe don't learn it the hard way. Hire me.
Absolutely. That's what we want. We don't want to repeat other people's mistakes if we already know what those are. Let's help. There's a whole set of other challenges that's going to come around.
Well, let's make new mistakes.
Exactly. Let's make new mistakes. I like the way that sounds. Let's make
So
new ones.
what about the selection process?
I was going to ask that same thing. Are you talking about tenants?
Go ahead. No, ask your question.
I was going to ask you, how do you find these tenants on behalf of your clients?
Absolutely. So great question. First and foremost, I mean, of course, you have to expose the properties as much as possible. Nowadays, everything's online. So about 75 to 85% of new applicants come in from online. So everything from Zillow to Google Homes to Yahoo Pads. There's about 65 different websites that you put the property on. At that point, you get applicants that come in, and so you're doing. We learned a long time ago that it's better to take an additional day or two to really kind of screen this as opposed to hurry up and rush it, because it's going to cost you so much more time in the middle of a tenancy to get a tenant out. So, of course, what are we looking for? We have certain criteria. Everybody's a little bit different, but our base criteria is at minimum 3 times the rent, 600 credit score and above, no evictions, no bankruptcies in the past 3 years. Those are the basics. Now, we also know that life that's happened, say, for example, COVID 3 years ago. So a lot of people, their credit got dinged. So we tried not to necessarily just take those data points. We kind of try and take more of a personal aspect of it. And it says, okay, look, we see that you've got a great rental history. We see that you make enough money to rent this property, but your credit score got dinged a bit. And we can see why, right? Because you have the background checks. So at that point, we're able to adjust a little bit more in the sense of, to make it fair, what this works. Well, okay, well, maybe it's an additional security deposit, right? So because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to protect the asset. Now,
Right.
nobody's got a crystal ball. Even good tenants go bad. But we minimize the obstacles from past experience on what we have seen, and these are the formulas that work. So that's kind of our process on how we go in the background to kind of select the qualified resident. And that's what we tell our clients is we're here to find a qualified resident. Because at the end of the day, a big part of owning real estate is how long can it stay without turning over, right? So we want to find somebody that's going to not only stay there a good amount of time, but take care of the property as well.
What about selecting the property itself? If you have an investor come in and they're like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here, and how do I find the property, a good property? And I know there's a lot of money in finding that property. So do you guys help with the finding the property part?
Absolutely. So first, it runs the gamut. First, okay, what price point are we looking at, right? It's like when you're buying a residential home. It says, this is how much I can afford. Well, let's work at those numbers. It says, how did you get to those numbers? It says, well, I'm working with my lender. Great. Let's pull in the lender together and make sure that we're maximizing what you're comfortable at. Once we identify that, then we start looking at assets at that price point. Part of our evaluation on assets, when we've gone through all that, is a big part of it's what we call value add. There's a lot of properties that we find out there, and let's say it fits the scope initially. We go into the property and we see that it's a cliche, but we like properties that need a lot of work, ugly properties, because those are the ones that usually find a little bit more margin. Most people are kind of scared of it because, well, that's too much work. I don't know the contractors, who's going to oversee the projects. Well, once again, that's where your property management team comes into play, is because that's what they're there for. They're there to they're supposed to already have all the contacts with the contractors, vetted contractors, identify proper market value upgrades, meaning let's not go into a property and just put granite countertops on there because it looks great. Maybe that specific asset doesn't require granite countertops. We can get the same ROI if we put some updated Formica countertops or some replastered countertops, something that's a lot less expensive, but we're still getting the same rent. So let's make sure that we identify the correct upgrades. So we'll walk through them with that process. We get our contractors. So the property is under contract. It's being inspected by a licensed real estate inspector. We make sure our contractor goes in there to give our client the numbers. How much is it going to cost to do these market relevant value adds? And then what is going to be the rent to do that? It says, okay, so if we do these value adds, the rents are going to come to this. So we have how much we're going to need to spend during an option period, so that way our client can make the most informed decision during that time. There's less surprises later on. Because sometimes we'll receive a call from a prospective client that says, hey, we're closing on a property today. We need a property manager tomorrow. Fantastic, great. We'll go through everything, and sometimes what happens is, it says, well, but my agent told me I could rent it for example, $1,000. It says, unfortunately, they only rent for $800. Not that the agent was being malicious by no means. That's not their wheelhouse, right? They're not there to kind of really assess
You guys,
the nuances.
Call it
You guys do that.
overly
We'll do that.
optimistic.
So that way a client has all the information. They know what the current rents could be during this time, the way as is. What are the relevant market value adds that we can do? How much is that going to cost? And what's going to be the new rent amount? So when the time comes to close, not only does your PM team have the vendors lined up if there's work to be done, they're already rocking and rolling day one after it's closed. But we also know what rents we're going to hit and who's going to be accountable, right? Your property manager is the one's going to be accountable for hitting those rents, not the agent that helps buy it.
And I think that's a huge, huge point to make, because something, as I look deeper into it, you go on all these online ones that are for sale, which, that's not usually where you find them, but you look at the prospective rents and they are wildly optimistic. Sure. If you didn't live in San Antonio, if you didn't live and work and know the area well, if you're buying from out of California, Mexico, wherever, be like, yeah, because you don't know that $1,200 a month is a wildly optimistic rent amount in a certain area of San Antonio, when really, based on us here, we'd probably know that it would only rent out for $900. But if you start looking at these online properties, wildly optimistic is what I would call.
That's a good point.
You have a question?
Yeah, I did. And kind of to your point, I was wondering, where do most of your clients come from?
We've been fortunate to grow by word of mouth.
Okay.
We really don't do much marketing. Going back to we were talking about our model that we kind of keep it under a certain number. It has worked well for us.
Okay.
So most of ours is just word of mouth, really.
And are they local, or are they?
So about 65 to 70% of our clients are out of state, out of country.
So you're boots on the ground.
We're boots.
Too,
that's
which
a
is
great
huge.
way of putting it. We're boots on the ground. Throughout, of course, this being Military City, USA, when we first started, many of our clients were military. And it was during the time, it was about 2010, 2011, where that crash was happening. We saw that a lot of individuals weren't able to sell their homes, and they were going to be stationed somewhere else. So that's kind of how we started. And a lot of our systems became, because of that, was these individuals are definitely out of contact most of the times. So we built a lot of our systems for individuals that just needed, once again, that turnkey, full service product. And it's grown throughout the years. And now, yes, it wasn't intentional, but because of the way we were constructed, I think individuals that are out of state, out of country, feel comfortable with us because we are able to take care of everything from A to Z. And we have that communication where they know, where videos or photos, they see the progress. If we're doing something minor, as HVAC system change out or full renovations, you're seeing it all documented, and you can see what's happening.
Cool. We're about out of time. Did you have a last question you want to fit in?
No, I think that covers what I wanted to know.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jaime. We got a whole lot of information there. And when it comes to real estate investing, it is a whole world.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And you've got to know what you're doing, and a mistake that you make in the very beginning or anywhere during the process can cost you big time. So getting professionals to help with that, I think, is a huge deal. All right, so wrap up the show quick. Oh, so Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
You can reach me at area code 210-672-4000, or our website is spm-roi.com.
Cool. And Keaton?
Yeah, if people want to get in touch with us, they can reach us at txsuits.com or 210-503-2800.
I feel like y'all should really capitalize on the fact that Suits is on Netflix now and everybody's watching it. And you could really lean into that. And you're like, what are Texas Suits?
Hey.
And reach out to Keaton.
Yeah.
Reach out to Keaton.
I love it.
There's something there. All right, as we wrap up the show, quick reminder, check out our latest podcast or catch video version of the show anytime by visiting our website at satalkradio.com. That's going to be it for us. You guys have a great week. We will see you on the next one.
Hey, thanks.
Thank
you
you
too.
so much.
Thanks for having us.